The United Kingdom is home to some of the most iconic sites in the world.
Whether it's an engineering marvel like the Forth Bridge,
or the exuberant architecture of Blackpool's famous tower.
or an exotic garden housed under giant sci-fi domes like the Eden Project.
These are some of Britain's national treasures, and they span the length and breadth of the country.
They can be ancient monuments or much-loved natural wonders.
Or they can be world-famous buildings.
I suspect I've been to almost every cathedral in Britain, and this is the biggest and the best.
Every national treasure means something special to us.
I love learning, and this is one of the homes of learning.
You're rarely very far from an extraordinary landmark in this country, and everyone has their favourite.
And tonight we'll discover the nation's favourite.
We've been granted unique access to go behind the scenes of our greatest national treasures.
Well, I never thought I'd ever get such a view of Big Ben.
We'll hear stories and hidden secrets from the people who know them best. As we count down and celebrate Britain's greatest national treasures.
No surprise at all that it's a national treasure.
The United Kingdom has an embarrassment of riches when it comes to our national treasures, making our islands the most bejeweled in the world.
We've conducted a poll to discover the nation's favourite landmark.
Yes, we've asked people across the country and we've put together a list of your top 20 national treasures.
People voted from a short list of the UK's well-known landmarks, drawn up in conjunction with the National Trust, English Heritage and others. Which will claim the top spot? Only one way to find out.
So to kick off our countdown of the country's favourites, we're actually going to begin with one of the most idyllic.
This is Britain's 20th favourite landmark. You might recognise it.
Beginning our countdown at number 20 is Kew Gardens. Located in leafy southwest London, Kew Gardens is one of the largest and most diverse botanical collections in the world. Founded in 1840, its living collections include more than 30,000 varieties of plants. The Arboretum contains more than 14,000 trees. Many of them, like this one, are record-breaking champion trees that need to be examined and measured on a regular basis.
So it's a Quercus castanifolia, which is a chestnut-leafed oak. This particular one was planted around 1846, and it is one of the first in the country.
Tom and Say, Kew's young arborists, are about to check the height of the tree.
Entering into the unknown. Oh, yes.
They're about 100 feet up, the height of a 10-story building. They've paused their survey for a moment.
Not a bad view.
Not a bad view. See right over to the Kew Palace from up here.
From the air, you can see why Kew's buildings and exquisite gardens draw nearly 2 million people every year. The Palm House was one of the world's first artificially produced rainforest climates. The 10-story Chinese pagoda offers one of the finest views of London. And the Japanese Minka House is surrounded by 1,200 species of bamboo. Now it's back to work.
Cheers, buddy.
Tom and Say have identified the highest branch, so now they simply need to measure the distance down to the ground to calculate the height of the tree.
Still going. So let's pull that top. 36.6.
36.6.
Beautiful. Do you want to let them know that?
The Quercus castanifolia has grown an impressive 1.6 meters in 3 years. Tom and Say will be back to do it all over again 3 years from now. Kew Gardens has lent a distinct touch of elegance to the start of our countdown. Our next landmark is no less blessed. It houses one of the most prominent families in the world.
At 19, it's Buckingham Palace. Britain's most famous private house dates back to 1703, when it was built for the Duke of Buckingham, hence the name. The scale of the place is staggering. 760 windows, 1,500 doors, 775 separate rooms with over 350 clocks, and all lit by 40,000 light bulbs. But perhaps more importantly, Buckingham Palace possesses the most romantic balcony since Romeo and Juliet's in Verona.
Our next most popular national treasure is a favorite of mine, because every time I heard it, quite literally, I thought I was clocking on for work.
Good evening. The Queen is threatening to sue the Sun newspaper.
At 18, it's Big Ben and the Palace of Westminster. Big Ben is actually the name of the great bell that rings the hours. It's housed inside the Elizabeth Tower, all 315 feet of it. When it was completed in 1859, it was one of the largest and most accurate clocks in the world. But Big Ben and the rest of the Palace of Westminster is currently undergoing major restoration.
Yep.
And we get into the lifts.
I've joined the Big Ben coordinator Amanda Leck for my very own guided tour.
Wow, the journey begins.
The journey begins.
I've never actually been face to face with the iconic clock, and now I've been given privileged access to take a closer look. It was agreed that at least one of the 4 clock faces would always be visible while restoration work was in progress. At the moment, it's the turn of the north face.
This is it.
Right in front of us. Right
This
in front.
is
Come forward.
astonishing.
If we can go a bit further along,
Yeah.
we'll get a better view. There we
Yeah.
go, right in front of us here.
Well, this is stunning.
Isn't it beautiful?
It is absolutely
Yeah.
extraordinary.
And as you can see, this beautiful, vibrant blue that we've now got.
That's the thing which strikes you. The colours entirely different.
When we look back at records, and they've done an awful lot of research into this, they did a lot of paint sampling. They actually found that the original Victorian design was in fact blue. Which is
Everything about it is just so much more than you could see from down below.
Obviously, this has all been re-gilded, so you
Yes.
can see how nice and
It's
bright
lovely.
it is. And if you watch the minute hand, it moves every sort of 2 seconds. You can just about see it moving if you look very, very closely.
It is fantastic to look at it from this point.
It
but
is, it is.
inescapable too is the
Indeed.
view that Big
Absolutely. Let
Ben
me-
looks
Absolutely.
over of London.
And if we look beneath us, how many people are actually taking a picture of us
Yeah,
right now?
yeah.
These people have come from all around the world just to come and take a picture of the clock tower. And although we are clad in almost 800 tons of scaffold, they will still come and take a picture.
Well, I never thought I'd ever be this
This close.
to something
know.
which has been part of my life for a little
Indeed,
bit, really, I
indeed.
think.
It's synonymous with that
Yes.
10 o'clock
Yes, I
bomb
know, I
that
know.
stands for attention. That
yes.
we all know.
I do feel at home here.
Yes.
Our next national treasure is less of a landmark and more a microcosm of an entire human world.
It houses 8 million items, making it one of the largest and most comprehensive collections on the planet.
At 17 is the British Museum in Bloomsbury in London. It's the world's oldest national public museum. It once had its own underground station. It was the first major public building in London to adopt electric lighting. And it's now the largest indoor space in the world on Google's Street View. It attracts up to 6 million visitors a year. That makes it the UK's most popular attraction. The British Museum has played a big part in Jenny Ryan's life.
My mum brought me to the British Museum for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, 6 years old.
Yeah.
And I was so excited. Let's go.
For Jenny, it was that first childhood visit that helped to shape what she is now. One of the UK's leading quiz brains, the vixen from The Chase. Jenny and her mother go in search of their favourite exhibit and one of the jewels in the British Museum's crown, the legendary Rosetta Stone.
I've always loved coming and looking at the Rosetta Stone to start any visit here, because it's a real reminder that archaeology and history is still a work in progress, because until a couple of hundred years ago they didn't know what hieroglyphics meant.
Yeah.
And when they found this, suddenly it unlocked that code.
Discovered only 200 years ago in the Nile Delta, the Rosetta Stone carries 3 inscriptions of the same piece of text in the ancient languages of Egyptian and Greek and hieroglyphics. And so for the first time, hieroglyphics could be translated into any language.
I struggle to learn things just by reading them. So seeing an artefact and reading the story about it and being with somebody else to discuss it, that's made things sink in a lot more deeply than they would otherwise.
The fact is that from being really a small child, we've always gone to museums, gone to art galleries, and part of it has always been standing in front of stuff and talking about it and then wanting to find out more. And somewhere like this is fantastic because it inspires imagination, it inspires curiosity.
We call it the British Museum, but it's a world museum. There's something in there from every culture. I love learning, and this is one of the homes of learning. It's a beautiful place.
So our countdown is underway. Ahead are more world-famous locations, from coast to countryside and up into the mountains.
We're revealing Britain's top 20 national treasures. And so far we've featured 3 famous buildings and 1 extraordinary garden. But our countdown has only just begun.
There's just one island amongst our 20 most loved national treasures. It's a tidal island and it covers 57 acres with a population of just 30 people.
At 16, it's St Michael's Mount, located just 500 yards from the Cornish coast. With its picturesque fairy tale castle sat on top of a lush green woodland, St Michael's Mount was the first place in Britain that the Spanish Armada could be seen approaching back in 1588. It's a popular visitor attraction, but what's life really like on this tiny little island? The day begins when the ferry arrives to take the children to school on the mainland. To live here, you have to work here, and Darren is employed as one of the island's gardeners.
See you later, am I right? Cheers.
The island's biggest attraction is its Mediterranean-style gardens. Like his father before him, Darren works for the St Alban family, who've lived in the castle on top of the hill for 350 years.
Born and brought up on the island, if you like. lived here, obviously from birth, from a young age. So yeah, my parents were sort of maintenance and worked in the castle as well. And you know, I used to commute to school the same as my children do now, and sort of following my footsteps a little bit.
By mid-morning, the tide has gone out. The granite causeway is revealed. And for a few hours, the island is no longer just for the islanders. St Michael's Mount attracts more than 350,000 visitors a year. Few of them leave disappointed.
It's an amazing place because regardless of the weather, it's got an enormous character. If the sun one evening will make it look quite different to another. It attracts the light and it attracts character.
I have decided that I'd like to live here. I found out that you can actually, the people that work around here, they get offered houses here. So that's my new dream job, to live here.
Even the familiarity of living where you work doesn't seem to make the island any less attractive.
Sometimes when you go on holiday and you come back into Marizan, you come around the sort of coastal line and you see the mountain in the background and the seas all glistening in blue, you think to yourself, why did we go away?
Why indeed? I wouldn't. And now back to the hustle and bustle of central London. And what better way to take in its many sights than with the help of the Black Cab? A bit of a national treasure in itself.
More than 1.5 million visitors explore our next location every year. It is without doubt one of our most iconic religious buildings. And it has a history which stretches back over 1,000 years.
At 15, it's Westminster Abbey. Steeped in history, William the Conqueror was crowned in Westminster Abbey in 1066. Ever since then, every one of the 39 English and British monarchs, including our own Queen Elizabeth II, have been crowned here. The Lady Chapel has been called one of the most perfect buildings ever erected in England and a wonder of the world. It's a view shared by the Radio 4 journalist Peter White.
When I walk into a building, I mean, most people will start looking around. I won't. I'll start to listen. Blind people tend to listen to all sorts of sound ambience, so I'll click my tongue like that, and that will give me a sense of the sound of a building. And the first thing is that this is a high building, there's space, and of course, I can hear the silence. And it's the silence and the height and the space that's impressive. I think the problem for people who can see it, if I can put it that way, is that there is this tendency to be flicking around, trying to pick up as many impressions as you can. And in some ways, I suspect that sight is quite distracting from a building like this.
Peter has been granted special permission to listen to a rehearsal of the Abbey's choir school, a tradition dating back to the plain song chanted by monks in the 10th century. For these young singers, the acoustic qualities of this ancient building are as important to them as they are to Peter.
It's so big that you can hear the echo coming back about a bar later. You get such a full sound and you can really hear that you're a part of the sound. And because of the way the stalls are built, we're singing to each other. It's amazing.
2,000 years ago, Roman invaders discovered a spring about 12 miles from Bristol that delivered 1 million litres of hot water every day.
To take advantage, they built themselves a series of baths for their ablutions. By all accounts, they needed them.
2,000 years later, 1 million people visit the same site every year.
At 14, it's the Roman Baths. Located in Bath, the largest city in the county of Somerset. The Great Bath is a massive pool lined with 45 sheets of lead and filled with hot spa water. Nobody quite knows where the spa water comes from, but it contains 43 different minerals. You're not allowed to bathe in the waters these days, but you can experience a taste of Roman life 2,000 years ago.
This is Marcus Aufidius Maximus, centurion of the 6th Legion, and I'm Lemnus.
Played by actors, Marcus and Lemnus base their conversations on what life was like here. Visitors are encouraged to eavesdrop on their discussions and get drawn into another world.
So I was quite badly injured up at Hadrian's Wall. 2 arrows straight into the gluteus maximus.
Beneath the tunica says.
Yes, yeah. And so the water, it's healing. I mean, you should have seen me. I was a right mess, huge fever, shaking, screaming my mother's name, and then come here, heal in the sacred spring.
The actors are so immersed in their era, you'll never catch them out.
Do you get people from Australia?
Where? Who?
Australia.
Oh, people, yeah, places. Australia. I've never really heard of Australia.
Actors Matthew and Toby take a break.
I had a person come who absolutely hated Romans. He had a grudge about Romans. I've no idea why. A man maybe in his mid-60s, absolutely despised them like they were still here.
In spite of the challenges of acting the life of an ancient Roman, the baths aren't a bad place to spend your day.
In the morning when the mist is hovering over the water, you know, it's really nice to be able to say that we work there actually, because you just get lost in it.
As we work our way up the list of Britain's top national treasures, we'll encounter the UK's favourite mountain and one of its most bizarre stretches of coastline.
We're a third of our way through our top 20 national treasures. 8 of our locations are historic buildings known the world over. 8 others are natural landscape features, known either for their outstanding beauty, their vital statistics, or in the case of our next treasure, for their sheer uniqueness.
If you add together the coastline of the UK and all its islands, it comes to about 20,000 miles, which is a round trip from London to Sydney, Australia. And one of the most remarkable stretches of that coastline is in Northern Ireland.
At number 13, it's the colossal Giant's Causeway on the coast of County Antrim. The result of an ancient volcanic eruption, the Giant's Causeway is an extraordinary geological phenomenon. It's made up of 40,000 hexagonal basalt columns that create the impression of a massive causeway that supposedly connected the coast with a distant land. Born in Belfast and a frequent visitor to the Giant's Causeway in his childhood, Eamon Holmes recalls the legend of how it came to be.
You know, as kids, it was easy to believe the whole story about all of this because this has got form, this has got structure, this looks as though someone has built this. And that someone was Finn McCool.
Finn McCool was a giant who was challenged to a fight by a Scottish giant. The causeway enabled the two of them to meet halfway between Scotland and Ireland to battle it out.
You know, it's no mean feat to get around the causeway, and when we were young, I had 4 other brothers, and my mum and dad would always be saying to us, be careful, or you'll fall too late. It was always too late, but it never put us off. I mean, it was an adventure playground in the days before health and safety.
These stones lend themselves to all sorts of wild interpretation, like the giant's boot.
If you come here, you will realise this is a magical place. And I'm sitting in a magical chair. This is the wishing chair. It's actually very comfortable for being made from stone. And it's also very smooth. The reason it's smooth is that you think of your wish, you bury your wish in the stones, and then this is the really important bit. You move your bottom from left to right 3 times, okay? You do that, you make your wish, and your wish will come true. For me, this place represents playing, sunny days, being with my brothers, just wonderful things. And for anybody who comes to visit, it's the cherry on top of the cake on the most beautiful, beautiful coastal drive, the North Antrim coast. No surprise at all, but it's a national treasure.
300 miles away is another natural wonder of equal glory to the Giant's Causeway. Climbing upwards through our list is number 12, Mount Snowdon, the only mountain to make it into our countdown. Its name comes from the Old English for Snow Hill, and at 3,500 feet, it's the highest mountain in Wales. The cliff faces on Snowdon were used by Sir Edmund Hillary to train for the first successful ascent of Mount Everest in 1953. More than 500,000 people hike up its slopes every year, and most choose the least strenuous route to the summit. It takes about 6 hours, but thankfully, there's a cafe at the top. Snowdon is one of the only mountains in Britain that has its own railway. It's been operating for more than a century, and it takes 130,000 people on its 5-mile journey to the summit every year. Whether you walk or ride, the view from the top is sublime. Snowdon is a true national treasure.
Our 11th most popular landmark is a rather large chunk of masonry. It was built 2,000 years ago by the Romans to mark the northern edge of their ever-expanding empire.
Staying in the countryside for number 11, it's Hadrian's Wall. Stretching from coast to coast. Hadrian's Wall took 15,000 men 6 years to build. It's 73 miles long and actually stands way south of where the Scottish border is today. What better way to admire this meandering masterpiece than from the air?
Fish Bay Golf Echo Delta Yankee Oscar.
Thanks, Gary.
26 threshold. There's the wall, all left-hand side.
Yeah.
Big fan of history, and the history that must have been around back in 122 AD when they built it must have been amazing to build this huge, magnificent wall from coast to coast. It must have been absolutely amazing sight to see. All them years ago, what a feat of engineering it was to do that. That guy's house there is right on the wall. Here we are in the afternoon on a nice leisurely flight following Hadrian's Wall. Amazing.
And back on the ground, you can feel the Roman grit underneath your boots.
So the wall was 117 kilometres long, 80 Roman miles, 73 of our miles.
Historian Paul Tate is taking a group of ladies from the Women's Institute on a guided tour.
Troops at Housesteads, which are from Belgium. You have Asturian Spanish troops at Chesters. You have the Gauls, which were the French.
What's the gap in the wall for?
Oh yeah. It's just an access point. It's just basically put in there so people can get through, probably for the rock climbers, because these cliffs are used extensively for rock climbing.
So what was the wall actually built for?
I think the historians don't know, not really, like Paul was saying. Was it for defence? And then decided not. Was it a status symbol? Perhaps it actually was.
I think there should be Donald Trump up here so you can see what a wall should be like. It should be something to enhance the landscape, something to bring interest and
with gaps
to
for
attract
to get
people
through.
and to attract people, not to keep them out.
Sycamore Gap has become the iconic image of Hadrian's Wall. The tree is one of the most photographed in the country. Hadrian's Wall may be a fascinating document of what life was like in Roman Britain,
There's the men's living accommodation.
but it also happens to cross some of the most beautiful landscape in the country. Reason enough to walk every last inch of it. But of course, I'm a bit biased.
We're almost halfway through our top 20 countdown.
In at number 10 is a section of coastline which is always closely associated with our national defence.
It marks the end of the North Downs in Kent and the point where Great Britain is closest to France.
At number 10, it's the White Cliffs of Dover, stretching for 10 miles along the Kent coast. For centuries, the White Cliffs have been the first or last sight of England for both travellers and invaders. And on a clear day, they can be seen from France. We're joining a group of local fishermen. Their captain is Matthew Coker.
Well, we see them all day, really, nearly every day, and in the winter we spend probably 4 months fishing right underneath them to give us a good source of shelter from the wind and from the weather. When you're out at sea, just to see any land is a welcome sight, and to always be able to see the land, like them cliffs with the sun shining on them, the way they lay, the sun shines on them most of the day. They're bright white, nice and big. It just gives you the feeling of like an old friend, really, I suppose, and you know that you've only got to head that direction and you're going to be okay.
It's good to be British, really. That's what it's all about, isn't it? The White Cliffs of Dover. That's what all our grandparents fought for, wasn't it? Quite a symbol of this country, really. Obviously, yes, going back to the wars, etc. I mean, and yeah, I think they're a big symbol of the country. Nice thing, maybe not very the right thing to say, but it makes us an island, and I like the fact that we're an island. So.
Reaching 300 feet in some places, the White Cliffs are made of the remains of seaborne creatures accumulated over millions of years.
That's what we're after. That'll be tea tonight. Makes it all worthwhile, doesn't it?
What do you call a bloke with a seagull on his head? Cliff.
With 9 more locations to go, we have more stunning landscapes, world-famous buildings, and one very infamous lake, or should I say, loch.
Our top 20 list of national treasures takes us back to the capital. Our next location is to be found among the skyscrapers of the City of London.
Our 9th most popular national treasure was, until as recently as 1963, the tallest building in London. Its dome is second in size only to that of St. Peter's in Rome.
One of the most famous and recognizable buildings on the London skyline. At number 9, St. Paul's Cathedral. Its architect, Sir Christopher Wren, was the first to be buried in the cathedral's vast crypt. Actor Hugh Dennis has an intimate knowledge of cathedrals in general and St. Paul's in particular.
My dad was a vicar, and he was the vicar of the Isle of Dogs. So this was his cathedral. This is the cathedral of the Diocese of London. And in his career, he then became what was called a prebendary of this cathedral, which is like a canon. It's a sort of honour, really. When I was a kid, my parents' idea of a summer holiday, if it was a wet day, we'd go and visit a cathedral. So I suspect I've been to almost every cathedral in Britain. And this is the, this is the biggest and the best.
St. Paul's sits on the top of Ludgate Hill, the highest point in the city of London. There's been a church on this site for 14 centuries, and it still draws the crowds. 1.6 million people visited last year. St. Paul not only lends his name to the city's greatest cathedral, he's also the patron saint of London.
You have to say, for a relatively small country, we've got a lot of great buildings and places. Looking at nice buildings and looking at a nice landscape and all the rest of it is incredibly good for the soul, isn't it? And maybe we realise that as a nation somehow. So this is one of my favourite buildings, and it has made it onto the list of our national treasures, and I'm not surprised at all, because I voted 3,000 times.
Our next landmark holds 263 billion cubic feet of water. That's more than all the lakes, rivers and reservoirs in England and Wales combined. In some places, it's twice as deep as the North Sea, which is perhaps the reason why it's so popular with cryptozoologists. Cryptozoologists are people who like to prove the existence of mythical creatures, like Bigfoot, say, or elusive water monsters.
One of those cryptozoologists is going to tell his story of our next national treasure. At number 8, it's Loch Ness, part of the 62-mile-long Great Glen, a massive geological fault line. Gary Campbell is one of a handful of people who believe they've spotted something on the loch they can't account for. The date was the 14th of March, 1996.
I was driving back to Inverness at the time, and I pulled over into a lay-by to do some paperwork before I went to see my next client. I had some time to spare. And just as I was getting to look at something, I just saw out of the corner of my eye, out there, I saw this black thing come out of the water. And I thought, no, I've seen things. And, but it disappeared back in, and then what it did was, it came back out again. And this was just over a matter of seconds, you know, but it was very much slow motion to me. It was like a mini whale, maybe 10 to 12 feet long, and about a quarter of the way out across the loch. It was nothing that I'd ever seen before.
Nessie hunting is a big business. People come from far and wide in the hope of spotting something. Anything. And the ultimate prize would be to snap a photo of it. Being an accountant, Gary has calculated that the Loch Ness Monster could be worth over £40 million a year to the Scottish economy. And it doesn't take long to realise why.
I love it. Beautiful. I really expected to meet Nessie, though.
We see this body of water that, you know, when it comes to the facts, and me being an accountant, I like the facts, you could actually hide the world's whole human population in Loch Ness. 7 billion people, the volume of 7 billion people could hide in there. This is what makes it difficult when you're looking for a monster, or even 3 or 4, or maybe 200. If you get 200 20-foot monsters in a volume of water that could hide the world's human population, it's going to be very, very difficult to find.
It's time to exchange a freshwater loch in Scotland for the gorgeous Dorset seaside. At number 7, it's the Jurassic Coast. Running for 96 miles along the Devon and Dorset coastline.
Between Exmouth in East Devon and Studland Bay in Dorset lies one of the most remarkable stretches of coastline in the world. And it's not just remarkable to look at.
It's remarkable because coastal erosion has revealed the fossilised remains of the extraordinary creatures that lived here millions of years ago. This erosion is also responsible for the chalk stacks common along this coast. And of course, the star feature of them all, Durdle Door. Since it was renamed the Jurassic Coast in 2001, this region's popularity has soared. James Weld owns this section of the coast.
20 years ago, we used to have 40,000 people visited Durdle Door.
Yeah.
Last year, we had 390,000.
Gosh.
And I think the fossil hunters coming to the coast have increased substantially people's awareness of the coast. And how it was created.
Durdle is derived from the Old English word thurl, meaning to pierce, bore or drill. It's a true natural work of art.
It really is so extraordinary looking, isn't it? The twisted rock and of course the famous alcove. Why hasn't it fallen down yet?
Well, one is a very hard rock, it's limestone. And secondly, as the continents bumped and pushed each other, the door started like that, and it's then moved up like that. So it is standing upright, hence why it's got so much strength in the arch.
Yeah. Think it'll survive you?
Oh, and the rest.
Our next national treasure was one of the most attacked places in Britain. That wasn't fired in anger. It's the 1 o'clock gun. Voted at number 6, it's Edinburgh Castle, on the banks of the Firth of Forth, looking down on the capital of Scotland below. Famous for the pomp and ceremony of the 1 o'clock gun and the military tattoo, Edinburgh Castle is as impregnable today as it's ever been. In its 1100-year history, it's suffered 23 separate sieges. No wonder it's earned the reputation it has. The view over the rampart bears testimony to just how difficult it was to gain entry. A love of history, and Edinburgh Castle in particular, is what brought Scottish heritage enthusiasts Charlie and Cara Allen together.
I come from Transylvania, which is now part of Romania, but Transylvania itself, it consists of 7 castles, and all the villages and cities are built around those 7 castles. So we're very much used to having a castle or a fortress as a focal point. And when I came to Scotland, the first thing I saw was the castle. And it's just something I've never seen before in terms of mightiness. It just towers over Edinburgh.
Just the sheer scale of it, you know, makes it, you know, and the ramparts of the walls make it what it is, impregnable.
Whoever had the flag up there was in charge, was in power. It was the place to look up to, literally.
Not everyone connected with the castle is involved in recalling its military history. These ladies are here for a much more peaceful reason. They're members of the Guild of St. Margaret's Chapel, the oldest building not only in the castle, but in Edinburgh itself. The chapel is dedicated to the memory of St. Margaret, who was Queen of Scotland 1,000 years ago. Started in 1942 under the patronage of Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret, the Guild of St. Margaret's Chapel has one very specific entry requirement.
I'm Hazel Margaret. I'm a middle Margaret.
I'm Gillian Margaret.
I'm Tia Margaret.
And I'm Margaret.
So is there something special about women called Margaret?
There's a Scottish word called smedum. And it means grit, and I think Margarets have a degree of grit about them.
Edinburgh Castle, a perfect distillation of peace and war. We're down to our last 5 locations, every one a British icon, but which will take the #1 slot? From coast to countryside, from town to city, we're counting down Britain's greatest national treasures.
The UK is full of natural wonders. Little pockets of the countryside with unique features, like the Needles, those chalk stacks off the coast of the Isle of Wight, or the Devil's Punch Bowl. It's a vast natural amphitheatre in Surrey. Our next attraction wouldn't look out of place in Arizona or Nepal, but actually it's in Somerset, and it's home to some rather tasty cheese too.
At number 5, it's Cheddar Gorge, carved deep into the Mendip Hills. Cheddar is the largest gorge in the UK. A century ago, Britain's oldest skeleton was found in the caves. It was 9,000 years old. Of the 500,000 visitors it attracts every year, most walk. Some even climb the near vertical rock faces. But there's a small number who like to make a bit of a rumpus. They're the Bridgewater Harley-Davidson Owners Group, HOG for short. The limestone cliffs of Cheddar Gorge were carved out by meltwater floods during the periglacial periods over 1 million years ago. In some parts, the gorge approaches 500 feet deep. Those are the bits that make the best sounds, apparently. And when the Bridgewater Hog arrives in town, everybody knows about it, particularly when the town is cheddar. But the cheese shops can breathe a sigh of relief, because it's the tea rooms that are getting the bikers' custom today.
Well, what I like about Cheddar Gorge is the cheese. We come here in the summer and sit there and have a bit of cheese and a nice crusty roll.
It's just a lovely place to ride. It's got some lovely bends, the road surface is acceptable, and you get the buzz of driving up the gorge.
Going up the gorge itself, it's just, yeah, it feels good. It's like give me a bit of a rev. Cheddar for us is where we come, it's where we congregate, it's where we meet.
And I met my lovely fiancé as well.
Which unfortunately they met in Cheddar Gorge, believe it or not. On a rally, literally met in the gorge, and come September this year, they're getting married. So unfortunately, so I have Cheddar Gorge to blame for all the money I've got to spend out.
Our next landmark was used as a prison for nearly 1,000 years. Among the last prisoners to be held there were the infamous Kray twins in the 1950s.
At number 4 is the Tower of London. These days, the tower is known as the home of the crown jewels, the value of which is thought to exceed £20 billion. But equally important are the birds. According to King Charles II's infamous decree, if the ravens ever leave the Tower of London, it will crumble and the country will be plunged into chaos. Therefore, the ravens' happiness is of paramount importance.
Breakfast time.
And the task of ensuring their happiness falls to Raven Master Chris Scaife.
Hello, Poppy. These two are my senior ravens, and obviously they rule here at the Tower of London over the other ravens. Hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go. All right, that's you lot done. They're continually on my mind. That's the problem, they're continually on my mind. Should the ravens leave the Tower of London, it will crumble to dust and a great harm will befall the kingdom. I have a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. Well, that's what I think anyway.
Not all the tower's 7 ravens live in one place. Look hard and you spot them everywhere.
The magical gifts that I have for them is patience. And to look after a raven, oh, hello, how are you? Have you come to have a nose? So one of the wonderful gifts that I have for a raven is I have patience with them. I have time to spend with them. And the tower allows me to do everything with them that I can possibly do. I see the Tower of London as the beating heart of Britain. From here, 1,000 years of history have pushed itself out worldwide. And so this, to me, is absolutely everything what history and pageantry and heraldry stems from, the Tower of London. I would definitely vote for the Tower of London. What about you? I think so.
So far, we've surveyed 17 of Britain's greatest national treasures. And now we've just 3 more locations to go before we reveal the greatest national treasure of them all. We're now into the top 3 most loved landmarks in the country.
This one is a national park with a landscape as distinctive as anything you'll find anywhere in the world.
No surprise then that it's attracted poets and painters.
It contains the highest mountain and the largest, deepest natural lakes in England.
At number 3 then, it's the Lake District. And at its heart, Windermere, the longest lake in England. The Lake District is famous for its varied verdant landscapes and its 14 glorious lakes and tarns. Its distinctive landscapes include smooth U-shaped valleys and steep, sharp ridges called fells. It attracts 16 million visitors every year. But not everyone is involved in tourism. Alison O'Neill is a shepherdess. Sheep outnumber people by 75 to 1 in Cumbria. Without them, much of the beautifully cut grass that characterises the Lake District would revert to woodland.
Sheep are exactly the same as people. They have ones who are incredibly friendly, who are fun, who are flighty, who fight, who don't get on, who headbutt each other. So they're really intelligent animals. People don't think they are, but they have, and they've got this unique system within their flock of who really is top sheep.
Having spent a large part of her life wandering the hills and dales with her sheep, Alison is a font of knowledge when it comes to this unique part of the country. Her favourite view is the summit of Orist Head, overlooking Windermere. It was this panorama that inspired Alfred Wainwright to start writing his legendary series of guidebooks on the lakes.
I think that's what's beautiful about this view. It's not dramatic, it's not shouting at you, it's not over the top, it's not screaming the highest mountains. It just has this beautiful, gentle, folding green hills and the lakes. It's a very beautiful landscape, a very romantic landscape. And it's a view that's inspired thousands of people.
And now it's back to London for our second most favoured national treasure. Of all the 33 bridges that cross the Thames, it's unique. At number 2 then, it's Tower Bridge, an engineering marvel of its day and one of the most iconic bridges ever built. But this famous bridge does far more than enable people and traffic to cross.
When is a bridge more than just a bridge? The answer is when it's a bascule bridge, sometimes described as a drawbridge or a movable bridge, which swings open to allow the boat traffic to go through.
It's this engineering necessity that gives Tower Bridge such an unusual appearance. No surprise then that it's one of the most photographed buildings in London. And it's that inventive Victorian engineering that makes it so fascinating. For these children with autism, the experience of watching vast structures like Tower Bridge move in known and predictable ways is not only pleasurable, but reassuring too. So a bridge opening has been planned especially for them.
I'm hoping to look up and see people walking on the glass floor above it.
It looks really cool. Seeing it just open and close, it's like it's moving, like it's a person.
Even though like Millie doesn't talk at the time about what she does, we do a homeschool book, and when she comes home, the front room will now be turned into the River Thames. Books will become boats. Barbies will become all the people. So even she takes it in, and it's just the whole experience, and it comes out in different ways with her.
They're getting closer by the minute.
Yeah, that's it. Try standing up. Now look.
Oh yeah, I can see it.
They've begun to close the bridge.
Are they opening it? I can't see it opening. Yeah, they are. They're getting everyone off. I mean, look.
It takes some time to ensure that everything and everybody is clear of the sections that will be raised.
Look, the buses are queuing and everything. Yay, look!
Yeah, it's opening.
The bridge has begun to lift.
Hey, Millie, look!
Each half of the road is balanced by counterweights hidden inside the towers. They are effectively seesaws, requiring only moderate amounts of power to raise and lower them. It takes a mere 75 seconds to close the bridge. It's a swift process, but for the children, It's a memory that will last a lifetime.
We've experienced and celebrated some of our greatest national treasures. Iconic buildings, glorious landscapes, distinctive coastlines, unique natural wonders. And now,
we've finally reached the top slot.
Yes, this is the landmark that got the highest number of votes in our poll.
It's also one of the oldest, probably 5,000 years old.
And it's not just one of the most famous landmarks in the UK, it's one of the most famous landmarks in the world.
Our #1 greatest national treasure is Stonehenge, located in the county of Wiltshire.
So what is it? It's a ring of standing stones, 13 feet high, 7 feet deep, and each one of the stones in the ring weighs about 25 tons.
And because the people that produced it left no written records, it's as much a mystery today as it's ever been.
So, extraordinarily, this world-famous site is nothing more than 93 lumps of stone, but taken together, they constitute the greatest British national treasure of them all.
Although it's a mystery about how and why Stonehenge was built, there are no shortage of theories. Some believe it was an astronomical observatory. It was designed so that on the summer solstice, the sun rises over a single stone standing outside the main monument called the Heel Stone.
Some believe it may have been a concert hall. Researchers have discovered that the stone circle causes sound reverberations similar to those in a cathedral.
And some believe it to be a cemetery. Around 200 people are buried within the grounds.
While Stonehenge attracts 4,000 to 5,000 visitors daily, there's one very special day of the year when attendances go through the roof. A day when the stones and the heavens align in complete harmony. That day is June the 21st, summer solstice, and that day is today. There are about 15,000 people here. Many are regular visitors, but experiencing solstice for the very first time are Dan and Lorna.
Sunrise is at 57, yeah. So yes, half an hour the countdown has begun.
Quiet descends in the last few moments before sunrise.
I'm not particularly religious or spiritual, but you can feel something here, whether it's the people that bring that energy, or the stones, or the connotations, or the history. There is something here, and they've been doing this for 5,000 years, and we're just the latest people to do it this year. And yeah, fantastic, happy to be part of it.
It's 4:56, only seconds to go. For thousands of years, the sun has risen on the longest day and bathed Stonehenge in perfectly aligned summer sunlight. Today, though, Stonehenge has acquired the additional accolade of becoming Britain's greatest national treasure.